Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy here on the smartmoneyculture.tv. So we've got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about a few different things that affect our economy: tariffs, DEI, and stagflation. Oh my! So this is going to be kind of a more fun episode. It's about the it's Friday. We're going to have some fun with it. But how are government policies either healthy or bad from us coming from both sides of the aisle? So stay tuned, and we can have a fun show today, but also informative. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a lot to cover today, and some of it's more ironic, some of it's a little funny, but things for concern here. So the first article, this actually just popped up, and this is from Fox News, but it's in quite a few different articles. Let me find it here. There was a fight on the within the Secret Service, fighting amongst themselves, where one of the Secret Service agents protecting Vice President Kamala Harris had to be led away in handcuffs. What's going on with the Secret Service? They get made fun of a lot in movies and stuff, but apparently one of the Secret Service agents punched their superior during an altercation. And if you know anything about military or rank, they said that's a huge no-no. So they were handcuffed and led away, and very possibly will face charges. So they had to give a briefing to Congress as to why in the world is the Secret Service fighting amongst themselves instead of protecting the vice president. That's kind of scary, and it's also does not do much for the reputation of the Secret Service, which they do fill a valuable role and function. I mean, the nation's leaders should have protection, especially given that there have been assassination attempts and people would target them. So again, there's they're asking why, and trying to figure out why a superior was physically attacked, and she was actually the commanding agent in charge at the time, and the other agents had to subdue her, the Secret Service agent that punched her superior and lead her away in handcuffs. But apparently, they're calling it a medical matter, but it's much deeper than that. So other Secret Service personnel cooperating with the congressional investigation are labeling this as inadequate training and a double standard in disciplinary actions. Why? And this is really comes in. The incident raises concern within the agency about the hiring and screening process for this agent. There were previous incidents in her work history that were overlooked. And why would they do it? Because they lowered once strict standards as part of the DEI diversity, equity, inclusion effort. So it's DEI is led to all kinds of problems in our country. I'm not going to be very favorable to DEI. It's a big reason why we have our universities absolutely failing. When you have college educated students protesting for genocide and to wipe Jews off the map, again, our Ivy League schools have always had an anti-Semitic issue. It has gotten so much worse the further they've lurched to the left, and people have been hired based on DEI rather than actual credentials. And you have very educated people, minorities that have spoken out against this. So you get, the president of Harvard that committed plagiarism and was forced to resign because of that. You have, I mean, this is really a plague on our society, and it's raising its ugly head here with the Secret Service. I'm shaking my head more than anything else. It's kind of funny. We're going to jump to another article, and I've talked about this, how DEI requirements are really hamstringing, are causing problems not only with Biden's EV agenda, but government production all around. So this is from the Daily Caller, which is another right-wing source, or right-leaning source. But this really does explain, and we've talked about how, the goal was to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations by 2030, and how this is really being threatened by DEI requirements. So again, they got documents and statements through FOIA requests. This is all set up by federal grant funding, because if the federal government itself doesn't have the mechanism, and they're not contractors, they don't know how to build stuff. So they have to contract all of this out. And to get the grant funding to build these EV chargers, the money's there. But the applications have to really, it's like 100 pages or so that they have to submit, that throughout the entire process, they have to intentionally be committed to engage in intentional outreach to underserved communities. Some of these are by hosting neighborhood block parties. What does this have to do with building charging stations? It's like a cartoon here. And as a result, that's why they've only built 7 as of April 1st, despite $7.5 billion in allocated funds. First of all, normal companies probably aren't even touching this. Why? It's nuts. And so one senior DOT official is saying policies like these are screwing everything up in official government language. So they have to provide sporting or cultural events as well as games and contests instead of just going and building the charges. Applicants should make available multilingual staff or interpreters for community members. What does this have to do with building charging stations? And because there's all these requirements, James Riggs at the Manhattan Institute commented that it just slows everything down to a snail's pace. These public involvement requirements are possible to quantify. So really the people approving this can pick and choose based on very subjective standards who they want to actually get the money. Apparently a lot of this is just being spent in worthy communities rather than actually being used for building charging stations. So, and they have to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And this is not just for EV stations. So Semiconductor Focused Chips Act, another Biden plan, has the same or similar DEI requirements. So it's affecting federal grants and monies that have been allocated, the money's going out, but instead of using those funds for what they're supposed to be used for, it's being spent on all kinds of other, block parties. I mean, hiring interpreters for people that they'll never really communicate with in the community unless someone calls and has a question. That's not the point of a constructor. Contractors come, they build, they do the project, they leave. Doing community outreach, it's very 1984ish. It's very top down. Government tell you what you want to do, what you need to do, and it's not about the actual results. It's about promoting these very fuzzy and very poorly defined rules, and you wonder why the government can't get anything done. So again, they have to promote local inclusive economic development entrepreneurship, such as the use of minority-owned businesses. Again, this is probably unconstitutional. where the federal government is using race-based criteria in the grant process. Um, that hasn't stopped the Biden administration though. So that's to be focused on to help train, place and train people in good paying jobs or registered apprenticeships with a focus on women and people of color and others that are underrepresented in infrastructure jobs. Instead of hiring people who don't know how to do the job and just do it because, to be honest, most women are not in construction. Most women aren't garbage men. Most women don't go work in the mines. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. There are rare exceptions. Most men take difficult jobs. I don't think there's really a difference in people of color. But again, I've talked about people that were trained. They spent government money to train people in this program to go and build the charging stations. If you support EVs, that's what we should want to have happen, to get them built. People aren't going to buy EVs or use them throughout the country unless you have charging stations. But instead of focusing on building charging stations for electric vehicles, the government's throwing money away. They might as well light it on fire here. And so, again, I think, again, the article continues on with some of the other things. And it talks about how the private industry is building 140,000 AVs, but this is a comment from a DOT spokesman, a official comment. But as far as the government funding actually being responsible for any of this, it's not very likely. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We've got about a minute before the next break, but some concerning things, and this is going to get into our next topic, which is tariffs. China's megaport in Peru alarms U.S. officials. Why? Why do we care about Peru? Because, excuse me, and this is going to get into some criticism of President Trump. And there's only so much the government can do with tariffs. We need to actually be involved in promoting our exports, getting out there in the world, and making our businesses more competitive. So again, it goes back to China flooding Mexico, South America with cheap goods and dominating larger markets. So they're building a 3.5 billion megaport in Peru that will allow, and it's going to be owned and controlled not by Peru, but by China. And this is going to be a great, make it a lot easier for China to flood South America with cheap products and make a lot of South America dependent on them economically. So again, there's politics going back and forth as to whether or not it will be approved. But Peru and South America is also very rich in resources, which China is very keen to dominate and maximize the extraction of resources from those regions. So, and the U.S. is also concerned that it could be used for military purposes. All of this is being done by the Chinese Communist Party and government, and they are nothing but innocent. So we're into our break, so we'll come back in a short bit. Welcome back, everybody. We're just talking about China building this megaport, not only for trade, but potentially for military uses. Because can we trust the communist government of China? Absolutely not. Going with that article, for the first time, this article actually just came out today, this morning, and this is from CNBC. Chinese automakers overtake U.S. rivals in sales for the first time. So this is global markets. This is not a good thing. Chinese brands sold 13.4 million new vehicles last year, and while American brands sold 11.9 million. So most Chinese cars aren't being sold in the United States. They're being sold everywhere else. Growth in emerging markets, and led by its leading brand BYD. We don't even know about that here in the United States because they don't sell them here, but they are going everywhere else and wreaking havoc on local economies and also on our own auto manufacturers. So this is a huge part of our economy, is having global production of vehicles. But have we made our vehicle market more competitive or just more expensive than ever? So huge inflation in the United States just makes our goods and products more expensive overseas and really cuts into our market share. So that's why these cheaply produced, highly subsidized goods by the Chinese Communist government are really devastating markets outside of our control. So again, Chinese brands pass the United States. Japanese brands lead the way with 23.59 million sales. And that they outpaced the U.S. up 23% from the previous year, compared to the U.S. growth of only 9%. So negligence, so not having, a lot of this was caused by COVID, where you had huge disruptions in the market, but negligence from legacy automakers. You have consistently high car prices has driven away consumers, and especially overseas, to more affordable Chinese alternatives. This is the problem when we think very small-minded and look at our own economy and say, look, we can increase prices, they can afford it, there's profits, there are profits. We're competing globally. And so as we make manufacturing more difficult here in the United States, we are affecting and enabling some of our worst enemies. Again, China is not our friend. And again, the article goes more into it, but just want to highlight this: that look, this is a concern, and the rise of the Chinese Communist Party. We need to do something about it. We need to be strong about it sooner rather than later. So I'm gonna jump to the next article. And this is all about stagflation. What is stagflation? So this is something that's been thrown around mainly by right-leaning economists. And it really talks about how the government only causes more damage when they throw money at problems. I was talking yesterday about the SBA loans, how the government threw so much money at SBA loans, trying to keep the economy afloat by just throwing more and more money at the problem, rather than actually fixing the underlying issues, that the government screwed things up by closing the economy down. And yes, we listen to bad science. We listen to Fauci. We listen to the so-called experts. That, again, there was very little facts, very little science based on this. This is more about control than anything else. So stagflation is really when you have high inflation and low growth. Traditionally, you want to have some inflation, a small amount, 1% to 2%. And as the economy grows and we get more production, again, sometimes prices go up a little bit because everybody's buying more, because there's more money and there's more prosperity. However, the problem is, like right now, we don't have more goods being produced in our country. Most of the new jobs are going to government jobs, short-term jobs, or the vast majority of new jobs are going to the millions of people coming into the country not the people that are actually here and established, which means people have less money in their pockets. And, the most of the jobs being created for illegal immigrants are very, very cheap jobs. They're not supporting families and again, it's driving up the cost of everything. So it's all interconnected. So it basically, basic summary of this article is when the central bank decides to boost the rate of economic growth by raising the growth rate of money supply, it can have a short-term effect. Coming out of COVID, there was a big boom. 2022, things were really bad. 23, it's a huge increase in inflation due to all this cheap money put out there. But what is the Fed doing today in 2024 to combat this? The SBA just announced a whole new set of loans up to $5 million. All this more money being poured into the system, and at the same time, they announced this. They can't deal with the defaults. They can't handle and actually manage all of these. But the BFS, which is the U.S. Treasury's arm of collections, so the BFS pretty much does all the collections for the federal government, or most of the collections that the IRS doesn't do. The IRS does taxes. BFS is kind of a catch-all, does a whole bunch of other things. So the BFS has been collecting on the SBA loans, and it hasn't been announced, but the word is out. Came out yesterday that they're overwhelmed. They can't handle all the issues that they're creating, so they're just shoving it back to the BFS. Collections and defaults are going to continue to go through the roof, and they're going to have very little redress with the government because they're just overwhelmed. They don't have the staff. They didn't plan. They didn't prepare for any of this. It's just a giant mess. And we have plenty of people that are trying to deal with this. Businesses do close down. Businesses are being affected throughout the economy. And so a lot of times businesses just close. It's just the way of life. So it's just a vicious cycle. They pump money they increase the money supply, so there's more money, but unless you increase the number of goods at the same time, you have more money chasing the same amount of goods. So what happens? You get inflation. So, and then once people realize and catch on to this, and this money is kind of floating around the society, so you get more dollars chasing the same amount of goods. The only way that the Fed can actually have any further impact is by doubling down and doing more of the same. Or they can raise interest rates, which pulls everything back and everybody holds on to their wallet, which is what's happening now. They have much higher interest rates to counter high inflation, which the federal government created in the first place by throwing money out there and raising the national debt to astronomical levels. And now there's plenty of liberals out there saying, look, we need to do something about the debt. There's still plenty of them out there saying, hey, we can just spend into oblivion. If you believe them, I've got a bridge to sell you. So just to make this a little more fun and easier to understand, I'm going to play a quick little video here. I'm talking about stagflation, and this is from Common Sense Soapbox.
I can't believe how expensive everything is.
What could have caused this?
The Federal Reserve.
You and your conspiracy theories.
Did somebody say conspiracy? Because, brother, I need to talk to you.
So the guy in the alligator is labeled Florida Man, and yes, they do make fun of Florida too.
Nice gator. How's it on gas? Well, it's a hybrid. Runs on chickens and drifters, so not so good. That's why I want an award with this Federal Reserve you're talking about. What is it?
The Federal Reserve, or the Fed, is our central bank, which was created in 1913. It supposedly has three primary jobs: maximizing employment, stabilizing prices, and moderating long-term interest rates. So it plays a massive role in the supply of money in our economy.
Great, so why don't they just print more? How else are we going to afford these price increases?
That's basically what they've been doing. The Fed has kept interest rates at historic lows for the last few years. Low rates encourage people to borrow and spend more money. Simplifying things a bit, the more people borrow, the more the total money of the Fed's balance sheet expands. Meanwhile, we haven't exactly been producing all that much to match that currency in the last couple years.
So that's why Sudafed got so expensive.
Yeah, that's inflation.
But isn't that what the Fed's supposed to prevent?
Yeah, and they're doing a great job. That's what you get when you put lizard people in charge of the economy.
Anyway, the Fed is supposed to keep inflation low, but the only way they can do that at this point is if they significantly increase interest rates and pull back the amount of money available in the economy. But doing that would probably create a huge drop in consumer spending, which could result in job losses and more businesses going bankrupt.
So they're darned if they do and darned if they don't.
Yeah, but it's a problem they created.
And more like we're darned if they do and darned if they don't. Well, I'm convinced. Let's go find this Federal Reserve and beat him up.
And how are we supposed to do that? We can barely afford to drive home.
Hop in. He won't bite. Probably.
So, interesting article. It really does highlight the irony. And really, when we talk about the Fed and the national bank, everybody hangs on every single word that comes out of them. Are they going to raise rates? Are they going to drop rates? This and that. Instead of focusing on real production in the economy, we should be focusing on, hey, are we producing more goods? Are we competitive globally? Are we able to thrive in global markets and create more American factoring and goods? More and more, our economy is focused on a service economy. There's healthcare, and those are all valuable things, but we're not producing things anymore. That does not help us be competitive. We're not exporting healthcare. I'm involved in legal services. It's a service. When I help people save money with the federal government, I'm not producing anything that can be exported or used to boost. It doesn't add to the supply of goods in the economy. So again, it's just we're focused on all the wrong things. Just last Wednesday, they had new inflation numbers, and the Federal Reserve, based on that and a bunch of other, labor market, other information, they decided not to raise rates or cut rates. We're right now at that point where the Fed is pulling back. They've raised rates, and so it's taking more money from individuals. It's hurting businesses. It's hurting the purchase of goods. And so as a result, what does the government do? Throw out more money with the SBA program, a whole new round of loans that they can't even handle. And we're just throwing more money at the problem because that's what our government always does. Real production and the ability to really increase our economy does not lie with our federal government or state governments. Governments rarely produce anything, and if they do, it's through socialism, which is usually very, very ineffective and wasteful. So again, it's rare where you have a socialist or a nationalized company or industry that can compete globally. So moving on a little bit, changing topic a little bit. We're going to jump to the next article here, and this gets a little political, but I kind of try to stay away from talking too much about different tax courses or tax cases affecting top politicians. The Trump trial, I mentioned it briefly. I touched on the Hunter Biden gun case, but here this is very interesting when it comes to taxes, because this is a tax trial. You almost never get trials because people almost never go to court on these issues. It's usually pretty clear. The numbers, the bank statements, they tell the story. And so if you committed tax fraud, usually it's a pretty solid case against someone. You go to trial to hope to get a sympathetic jury and get off. But here, Hunter Biden, first of all, the funny part of this, the infamous laptop that he left behind and forgot about probably because he was high. And this is the one that was claimed was Russian disinformation. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, I mean, everybody claimed this was Russian disinformation. You had over 51 security experts all sign onto a letter saying this is Russian disinformation. Well, that was a huge lie. We know that's a huge lie because the IRS verified it back in December in 2019. So it was obtained and authenticated just after the last election. So they had it, but didn't authenticate it until the election was over. Oh no, I'm sorry, that was 2020 was the election. So so it was obtained and authenticated back in 2019, and then the government just lied about it. I'm sorry, the liberals and everybody that this would be bad if this was like authenticated. They put out a huge lie that it was Russian disinformation. Now it's being used in court directly against Hunter Biden. It should have been used in court years ago. He was finally charged with 3 felony and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses for 2016 to 2019. These issues actually started back in 2014 and 15, but you had federal prosecutors, don't know why, but they just let the statute of limitations run by delaying, dragging their feet, never filing actual charges. So this was, many would suggest this was politically motivated to just kind of let things fall. You had the infamous deal with the prosecutors until that he was going to serve almost no time, plead to a misdemeanor, and pretty much have this wiped under the rug. Whistleblowers came out and blew the whistle and said, "Look, this is ridiculous." And I think it's ironic that really right now the book is being thrown at Hunter Biden. I did mention before how these taxes have been paid. Usually, once the taxes are paid, okay, we're not worried about it too much anymore. But he committed massive fraud here. And it might also be that because of the political implications here, letting off the president's son really flies in the face of justice. And it's become such a political hot potato that, they can't interfere for Hunter Biden anymore. You had, Hillary Clinton got similar treatment with her bleach bit, wiping out and destroying evidence. And we have more issues going on with the Burr recordings, or his ghostwriter that deleted and tried to destroy evidence that should have all been preserved for FOIA requests for government transparency. So these are all felonies being committed in the destruction of evidence. And here, these are all tax-related offenses. So I really want to focus on why is he being charged? Is this a political intent? Maybe. Very possibly. If his name wasn't Biden, well, first of all, if his name wasn't Biden, they probably would have charged him from the outset. If his name wasn't Biden, a political connection probably wouldn't have paid off the $3 million in taxes. So politics are rife throughout this case. But currently, could it be political that they're still going after him? Yeah. Now that the taxes are paid. But I think it's pretty clear that he avoided taxes. And some of the times he filed a return. So in 2014, he successfully filed a return, reported his income, but he failed to report any of his income from Burisma Holdings. Again, he had multiple holdings companies. This is where he's been paid, I think it was $60,000 or $80,000 a month to sit on a board for an oil company or energy company in Ukraine when he knew nothing about energy. I mean, he has no experience whatsoever. The only reason he would sit on that board would be to provide access directly to, at the time, Vice President Biden. So this is more dealing with public corruption and bribery at this point. So again, this is probably why this is sticking around. So he failed to report mass amounts of income, and then when he did have the balances, we hit another break. So I'm going to pause this and we'll come right back. Welcome back, everybody. I'm just going to finish up with this article. One of the issues here, 13 and 14, they even have emails saying that you didn't report about $400,000 in extra income from Burisma. And this is straight from Rosemont, Seneca, and Boys. And this is the board that was setting up lucrative contracts for where the younger Biden worked and peddled the Biden name for political contacts. And so really this is a corruption and government bribery at its worst. It's been pretty ridiculous, the amount of money that the Bidens have obtained. And ironically, a lot of this, so he owed massive amounts of taxes, failed to report, but then when he owed, instead of dealing with it, he went and spent the money in a very extravagant lifestyle. So he got $1.3 million in cash. He was supposed to pay $751,000 on it, and he lived on $550,000 a year, which is, again, they would not allow an average citizen to live on that. He still borrowed in advance payments, so he received more cash that wasn't reported in 2014 and 15, the years that they let expire. He renovated a house and spent hundreds of thousands more rather than paying his taxes. So this is him when you are living an extravagant lifestyle and you're spending money like water instead of dealing with and paying down your taxes. This is where tax evasion comes in. So you owe, you ignore it, you don't report hundreds of thousands of income, and it really is the egregiousness of the case, the moxie, you could say, of completely blowing off your taxes. And ironically, all these emails and most of the proof is all on this laptop that he left behind. And it goes into other issues here. I do plan to follow this somewhat because it is a tax fraud case and it is national news. Like I tell people all the time, if the IRS is almost never going to come after you unless you get greedy and you go and blow money and live a crazy lifestyle. Again, there's stories of him driving cross country in very hot cars, going 100 miles plus, just to be with prostitutes and continue his drug-fueled craze. So anyway, stay away from tax fraud. Again, it deals with tax fraud, which is not reporting income, and also tax evasion, where he took active efforts to hide money from the IRS, not pay his taxes, and that's where people get in trouble. It's not the dollar amount so much. It's the bad acting, the fraud where you're actively trying to hide and defraud the U.S. government. So again, this is actually, I've seen this. Scams targeting seniors through impersonating IRS representatives. So again, this is something we've talked about before, but I want to re-emphasize it. We've seen this happen again. Again, the scammers often target seniors. I have a couple more cases where, again, they felt horrible, they felt silly, but these are people going after seniors, and these are very sophisticated. It's not the Nigerian prince asking for donations anymore. Those are pretty obvious, and again, there's some people that fell for that, but they use 12 triangles, they use all kinds of things to manipulate and take advantage of seniors. Preventing these scams is, the IRS is really trying to prevent these scams, and I think this is great that they are trying to help get this information out, and I try to share that with the people that I come in contact as a public service, because it is, it really does hurt people. So these are just some of the ways that they do this. Impersonation of known entities, IRS, Social Security, Medicare. They will never call and ask for money. So again, they'll try to pose as other tax professionals or familiar businesses and charities. We need to send us money, da da da. So they can spoof caller IDs, and they use quite a few tactics to lead people to not only answer but believe that they're legitimate. So some of the red flags here: claims of problems or prizes that they need to fix. So they make up urgent scenarios, outstanding debts, you need to pay us right away. They can be falsely informed that they owe IRS money. And sometimes it's based on a shred of truth. It is public information when people have tax liens filed on them, and there's all kinds of companies that flood people with advertisements trying to get them to hire, and some of those can be very bordering on fraudulent as well. But say, hey, you're owed a tax refund, you just need to send us this money to get the refund, or you need to verify accounts. And whenever they're asking for your banking information, credit card information, anything like that, the warning flags should go up. So pressure for immediate action. So this is a huge thing, that they demand immediate action without allowing time for reflection. Now, when you call the IRS, the new IRS under the Biden administration, this is exactly what they do. They tell people, and I've actually run into this, where they discourage people from getting advice. They discourage people from knowing their rights. And they threaten people all the time. And I've seen the IRS actually threaten people with arrest, not deportation, license suspension. So the states absolutely do this. Or here, I guess some of the scammers are threatening computer viruses. So if the IRS issues a threat of arrest, it happens. It's extremely rare, but that's absolutely when you should get their name, ask for their full name, ask for their IRS identification number. It should be all numbers. And if they don't give you that information there on the spot, and or have connected you to a manager, you know it's a fraud. But what I would also suggest that you do is get a second opinion. Now, are there times where you should not be dragging your feet with the IRS? Absolutely. When you hit with the bank levy, when your case is serious enough, but you should talk to a tax professional, and be aware of when you call in, if you get a high pressure sales pitch trying to press you into hiring right away, you need to call someone else. And then they have specified payment methods. So this is one thing the IRS will always tell you to pay through legitimate sources. So directly through irs.gov, you can go to an IRS office and make a payment, but you had already paid by check. And so if you go to an IRS office, you have, you can have confidence that they're accepting the payment. If you go to irs.gov, make a payment there, you'll get an immediate receipt. But again, a lot of scammers will focus on unconventional payment methods. Cryptocurrency, wire transfers, payment apps, or gift cards. The IRS will never do this. The states will never do this. And they'll ask for sensitive information like gift card numbers or credit card numbers. That the government will never do that. Even if it is a state and they do threaten to send a sheriff out, which sometimes they do. So if you have questions, give us a call. Call the IRS, report it, call the FBI. And again, if they know that you're going to report it, then they back off very quickly. So again, this is kind of a highlight. The IRS will never demand immediate payment via prepaid debit cards, gift cards, or wire transfers. IRS will they will always send a bill first. The question is, do you get it or not? They should never threaten to involve local police or the law enforcement agencies. I have seen it happen. I have called them out on it. And if it is the IRS, demand a manager if they mention anything like that, because they are violating your rights. Typically, they don't. State collection agencies will, but this is why it's important to get informed. Put on here, the IRS will never demand payment without allowing opportunities to dispute or appeal the amount owed. This is if they're doing their job right. So if you ask, can I dispute this or appeal this? And, can you give me a manager's number? Again, if it's scammers, we'll never do that. IRS will never request credit, debit, or gift card numbers over the phone. But like I said, they'll send you to irs.gov, or they'll tell you to go to your local office, IRS office, and make a payment. Or you can mail in a payment to an IRS location if one is not close to you. Again, if you have questions, give us a call. I'm spending more time on this than I wanted to. But last article we're going to touch on, this really gets to the tariff point of it. So this is from CNBC. So Trump floats eliminating U.S. income tax and replacing it with tariffs on imports. Is he serious about this? Who knows? He's just floating an idea. He sat down and went to Capitol Hill, met with the Republicans there, and had discussed a lot of policies. Some of these are ideas thrown around, but the idea of, and this is the problem, people think the government can just fix things. The government can mess things up. They can improve things by getting out of the way. But the government, again, governments don't really improve things. So getting rid of the income tax, I think that, again, that would be a huge boost for our economy. It would require the government to actually rein in spending, which almost nobody wants to do. Tariffs, we do need to get in there and address China and abusers, people that are abusing global markets. But it is something to be concerned about. So got a couple quick articles that I'm going to share talking about tariffs, and these are kind of funny, but true stories.
Until the 1960s, chicken was considered a delicacy in Europe. But due to America's ability to farm more efficiently, chickens were produced much more inexpensively in the US and then imported into Europe, driving down the overall market value of chickens. And this made life better for most people, except for a small minority: the European chicken industry. Big chicken at it again. So a number of European countries imposed a tariff on chickens to protect their chicken industries. This not only hurt the general population, which now had to absorb the higher cost of chickens once again, it also hurt chicken producers in the US. As a result, 1961 to 1964 was known as the Great Chicken War.
So, again, they want to protect local industries with tariffs, but that can harm consumers overall. But again, this is the United States flooding other markets with cheap chickens.
German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer reported that half of his correspondence with U.S. President John F. Kennedy was over chickens. Ask not what chickens can do for you. Ask what you can do for chickens. Because we're a country of the chickens, by the chickens, and for the chickens, the U.S. had to retaliate. So President Johnson imposed a 25% tariff on potato starch, dextrin, brandy, and light trucks. Harvard professor Robert C. Lawrence wrote, "The chicken tax crippled the U.S. automobile industry by insulating it from real competition in light trucks for 40 years. So, in the end, countless resources were wasted, and it's harder for Americans to get trucks, all because some Europeans got their feathers ruffled over cheap American chicken. And that is why tariffs are stupid."
So a couple fun articles, we're running out of time for the day. But just wanted to kind of highlight that tariffs are not the magic bullet that you would think. They might have a short-term impact, but to truly fund the government, I don't see it being reasonable to get rid of income tax. And it can hurt industries, because what do other countries do when we raise tariffs? They respond in kind. So unless you have, like the G7, unless you have a large global thing like the EU willing to partner together, tariffs usually are not very helpful in the long run. Case in point, when we issued tariffs on Russia to really hurt their oil industry, didn't help, because over time they just adjusted. And that's what happens with tariffs, is people find other ways around. They used diplomacy, and they connected with, of course, our worst enemy, frenemy, China. And China is what negotiated and bartered for Russian oil to go through China instead and get sold to global markets. So that's why the Ukraine war is still going, is that Russia's still selling oil like crazy. Much better plan would have been to increase oil production. American oil production. We still are the largest oil producer in the world, and if we would have ramped up our oil production, it would have crashed global prices, hurting OPEC. Again, they don't need more money in OPEC. They're just crazy over there. But really, Venezuela, some of the worst actors in the world that rely on oil to fund and run very repressive economies and countries. But if we would have dropped, made China, Russia's oil a lot less profitable, that would have forced them out of Ukraine a lot easier a long time ago. So it's not always about tariffs. Production, increase of goods can really make a huge difference, from chickens to tariffs on light trucks. The government can cause a lot of damage, but again, banning chickens. Yeah, that's the thing, is we weren't just sending chickens to Europe. We were sending them all over the world. And still are. So have a great weekend. I hope you had some fun with this episode. Hope you learned something, a lot of different topics. And we'll see what other ideas come from our political leaders.